What we're going to talk a little bit about today is what's taking place in the marketplace. As many of you know, National Pork Producer Council, NPPC, historically has dealt with regulatory and legislative issues. Most of those, while we may not like the outcome, usually have a very defined process that they go through. And then ultimately everyone is held accountable at the end for the decision that was made. In the new era here in the marketplace, as we move into those decisions impacting us that are either made or by pressure from activist groups or decisions made by brands, in this case, whether it be supplier brands or consumer brands, is a very messy situation that we're dealing with. And that's what I'm going to talk to you about today, is what's going on in the marketplace. It is by far, in my opinion, more concerning because of the what we call competitive turbulence that exists today in the marketplace, especially in the food service arena, because there's no longer any geographic expansion, and so they're looking for opportunities to differentiate themselves to their competition. And so I'm going to focus my discussion today primarily around the hottest issue we're facing, which is, I think, one that our industry has never faced before, which is the antibiotic issue. And what's changed here? I mean, primarily, why is antibiotics all of a sudden, the hot issue? First and foremost, the sentiment continues to get worse. Actually, we have seen a trend line developing in GMO discussion going very much in a positive manner. What's taking place on the antibiotic is continually to get worse and worse. Mainly driven from the standpoint there is a plethora, if you would, of those who are driving that discussion. Unlike the issue that we faced over the past few years, which was the debate on sow housing, primarily driven by one entity in that case, this is one that's widely spread across many different facets and groups, as well as this overall emerging issue in consumers' minds about antibiotic resistance. We're beginning to see, again, you heard me talk earlier about brand differentiation and increased awareness as a result of that. If you have major players beginning to use things in terms such as antibiotic-free in their commercials, in their statements, as a point of differentiation of why you should shop there, that helps to drive awareness way more so than any type of activist group. This is larger than pork. This is an issue facing our industry that is, again, in the species side of your equation with beef and poultry, as well as human medicine. Our lovely brethren in the chicken industry, the broiler industry, is continuing to drive this from their production models, and that continues to raise awareness, not to mention the challenge that we continue to see on the EU. This kind of just shows you as it relates to we run monitoring content all of the time. And so it just shows you the increase since January of 2014, and this is through March, and if you continued it on, it would just continue to spike up. Anytime antibiotic are mentioned in the media, regardless of whether it's neutral or negative against us, results in not good for us. Because even the term antibiotic, generally speaking, there's not any positive that comes out of that. So the other thing it's really important to look at to find ourselves now, why do we find ourselves here? And I just use this slide as it regards to where we are today in the overall business situation and what major suppliers are faced with, which is this age of the consumer, primarily driven by social media, and that they're empowered by this buyer's demand of a new level of customer obsession for products, where that customer service is driving this. And I just use this to show you how it's changed from historical modes of the age of the seller to the age of the consumer, and that buying decisions more and more are being driven by user-generated content. What this is, what's their friends saying, what's bloggers saying, all of that. And this is just an example of the old versus the new and the influence of all these social media aspects of how it is that people today are exposed to information. We could say it's whether it's relevant or, more importantly, where it's science-based, that really doesn't matter as it relates to the exposition of it. I use a term a lot that we've dealt with historically with our elected officials, but now we deal with, especially with our channel partners being defined as retail and food service. You don't know what you don't know. And as they're making these decisions, they're being influenced by others in regards to that. So the idea being is this social media is the number one source of information of where people are going to find this stuff out. Here, just an example of what we're seeing happen as it relates to, especially driven by the poultry sector and the broilers, but using this, and then now you can see on Panera's here. This is a chart that we, at MPPC, we monitor all of this. We chart who is making the announcements and about what, and you can see the activity ratcheting up over here of these brands. Keeping in mind the vast majority of these are about poultry products, but the question that we get asked more and more by the customers is if chicken can do it, why can't pork and beef do it? And it's very simplistic in nature, but this is beginning to drive and ratchet up by, again, mostly dominated by food service, and most of it being QSR, quick service retail, side of the equation. I do want to also, you may have seen this chart last week, for example, just to demonstrate this showed up in USA Today and then Washington Post as it relates to a scorecard on the major food service, quick QSRs of their scorecard. Again, it was a survey that was sent out to them by a number of different firms, not firms, but NGOs that asked them to fill it out. The vast majority of people didn't even fill the survey out, but they give them a scorecard. And as you see up here, Chipotle and Panera are the only two that ranked very high as it relates to these issues related to antibiotics and sourcing practices for it. So, let's talk a little bit about key areas. And I should have prefaced by the fact that this discussion related to antibiotics is very much a joint effort, much of which is led by the National Pork Board. Jared Sutton, who was supposed to be here today, and I are kind of joined at the hip. I think we've had upwards now of over 200 meetings with our channel partners. There was a point in time related to the sow housing, which we said we need to be in there and talking to these guys. That's no longer the case. We're talking to them in multiple meetings that we're having. But we're being asked more and more questions in regards to what's different, things such as help define what medically important. What's the classifications of drugs of human versus animal? Specifically, I get asked questions all the time because of the poultry sector. Are you using products that are critically important to human medicine? And the simple answer is yes. Everything we use primarily in the swine sector is critically important in regards to that. I will tell you that great story is with 209 and 213 from the standpoint that we can now take away is most importantly the argument that's been pressured against us for a significant period of time. We're using antibiotics strictly for growth promotion. Now we can say that's no longer the case. And secondly, we have veterinary oversight. So the argument or the discussion of being that producers or farmers or ranchers could just go to any place that they would want, load their truck up with antibiotics, and then bring it home is not the case. We've got great participation by all of our pharmaceutical companies on label changes, and now with the addition of VFDs, all of these lend themselves to shore up our story about the fact that we do have veterinary oversight in this that helps to give our confidence to our customers. There's a lot of species differentiation. We have to explain what's different about poultry, what's different about beef, the classifications of pharmaceuticals that they have available, the life cycles that they have in regards to that, the metrics, that's a big question we'll get into, how we're measuring this, and then ultimately the educations, and then most importantly, I very much of an advocate for saying our challenge or goal is not to reduce the use of antibiotics. That is, we're very upfront. Our goal is to implement practices that reduce the need to use antibiotics, but our goal is not to reduce the overall amount of antibiotics. Because, first of all, for us in pork, zero is not an option. We have a different category of animals and group population. By the nature we chose to raise them, especially at times of the year, zero is not an option for us. So you see all this antibiotic-free terminology. Our stance is very, straightforward in our discussion with them. Responsible use of medically important antibiotics protects animals' health and well-being, ensures food safety, and preserves the effectiveness of animals and humans. Antibiotics are very much an important part of an overall integral herd health plan. Now, the idea being, as much of our customers, not our meatheads, but those individuals who are in charge of brand managers, social responsibility officers, very much believe that from the day the animal is born till it goes to market, we're feeding antibiotics. That is not the case. We tell them, have to explain the differential between, what we're doing, pulse doses, that the vast majority of our producers are no longer and have not been using antibiotics routinely through the growth promotion stage in the finishing. So terminology is very confusing. We constantly hear the term antibiotic free. Personally, if we could take that out of our genre, it would be great, because there's absolutely no such thing really as antibiotic free. It's naturally occurring. The label claim that's put on products, you cannot say antibiotic free. But when we're describing it to the consuming public, and many of our brands are using that term, and so today we have primarily two bookends, which is antibiotic free and all the rest of the product. And any time that you say that terminology, by definition, it gives the assumption that, well, this other product must contain some. And so there is an opportunity, I think, going forward, of the need for some reclassifications of how we describe the use. Overall, critically important as it relates to the medically important, and all of those terminology is very confusion. This dual use, or human versus animal, we get asked all the time to define what these are. The biggest thing that we get addressed, especially by our core customers such as Walmart and McDonald's, is the need for metrics. And we understand that simply going forward with a volumetric side of the equation of how much product are you buying and then using is not a solution to the problem. But we do recognize there's a need to figure out some methodology in which to go forward with that. And so cooperation with National Pork Board, ASV, I see Tom Berkman in the back of the room, is leading the effort here of working on, and Dr. Peter Davies is coming on with us on sabbatical and Pork Board, to work on this to figure out how it is that we might be able to report some numbers, and we're not for sure, our stance is we're not sharing any numbers from an individual farm data, but this would be an aggregate overall of how we go forward with that. And so we support the efforts of figuring out a way to do metrics, but this simple volumetric that we hear all the time, that 80% of the products used are used in food production, is just, we don't want to go that route. So our strategy, first of all, just kind of sum this all up, is building credibility on behalf of farmers, ranchers, and that, of demonstrating responsible use. You also need to take the term, we use it scientifically, I know, but judicious use does not resonate. We shouldn't really talk about judicious use because, one, we do lots of metric testing with consumers and I will tell you, judicious use doesn't resonate well. We've landed on responsible use, which kind of really demonstrates what our part of it is. It is very much responsible use. Minimizing the risk of further restrictions for preventing control, that's the next step. Right now we continue to be hammered back on define what at-risk animals are, define prevention. And so we have to work on defining what those are, much of which is different by species. We have to drive research priorities to support better understanding of resistance and related issues. Those are really critical for long term. Mobilizing individuals to refute and defend misleading claims. One of the challenges we have is we don't have hardly any, one or two, medical professionals as it relates to human medicine standing up and speaking on behalf of the animal ag sector. And so identifying people that are outside experts that can, again, speak up, that says the real issue is not relying on animal agriculture. Engaging producers on compliance and accountability, obviously with 209 and 213 coming as we move into next year. A major outreach education campaign will be on behalf of the industry, making sure our producers are in compliance, and then continuing to engage our customers. I spend an inordinate amount of time with especially our customers such as Walmart and McDonald's to make sure that we don't continue down the path of announcements related to an uneducated decision that was made that fundamentally the supply chain can't meet. So work in progress. All of us is working together, specifically MPPC, ASV, and Pork Board, working together on this to develop appropriate metrics going forward. Pork Board is engaged in an overall new strategy, a new campaign on messaging and that relates to the public relations side of the business. And you'll see more of that coming out this fall. Educational material for states and producers, then ultimately research is where we're going. So, Pat, that I know we're on a tight time frame. I know you may have a lot of questions, and we could go into lots of specifics about what's taking place at some of our core customers. But I will tell you, it is a great opportunity to leverage what we have been doing for the past 2 years with our channel partners and core customers. We know who they are. We identified the individuals. They're now calling us prior to the event of this. But more importantly, I think it's a great opportunity for us to leverage what we know on the whole realm of the use of antibiotics in producing safe food.